Marcus never liked the idea of changing schools, but this time he didn't have a choice. His father had decided it was better for him to move to an elite private school far from their old neighborhood. The building was tall, shiny, and filled with students from rich families, children of lawyers, doctors, businessmen, and politicians. Marcus on the surface looked like he belonged there too. His clothes were expensive, his shoes spotless, and he carried himself with a calm confidence. But deep down, he knew he was different. He wasn't just another student, and it wasn't just about being African American in a place where most faces looked nothing like his. He was the son of a man whose name carried fear and respect in equal measure, a mafia boss. Yet, Marcus didn't want anyone to know that. At school, he only wanted to be Marcus, a teenager trying to fit in, play basketball, and maybe make a few friends. On his very first day, as he walked through the polished hallways, he noticed the curious stares. Some students whispered, some tilted their heads, and a few simply ignored him. He could feel the unspoken question hanging in the air. Who is this new kid? Marcus took a seat in his first class, trying to stay quiet. He wasn't the kind of boy who enjoyed attention. He liked observing people, watching how they laughed, how they talked, and how they treated each other. Within just a few hours, he already understood the system of the school. There were the popular kids who acted like they owned the place, the quiet ones who kept to themselves, the athletes, and then, of course, the bullies. They were easy to spot, the ones who walked too loudly, laughed too harshly, and always looked for someone weaker to pick on during lunch. Marcus carried his tray and looked for a place to sit. The cafeteria buzzed with chatter and laughter, but to him, it felt like walking into a storm. He finally sat at an empty table in the corner. As he began eating, he caught a few students glancing his way. Some smirked, some whispered, and some simply looked at him with curiosity. He kept his eyes down, pretending not to notice, though his heart pounded inside his chest. Marcus was used to people treating him differently. Back in his old neighborhood, kids were cautious around him. Everyone knew who his father was, and that fact alone built an invisible wall. Some kids wanted to be his friend just to feel powerful. Others avoided him completely, scared of the danger that came with his last name. Here, though, no one knew. And for once, Marcus thought maybe he had a chance to start fresh. After school, Marcus walked home slowly. His family's driver waited in a black car near the gates, but Marcus asked to walk instead. He wanted to breathe, to think, and to enjoy the feeling of being just another boy walking down the street with his backpack. On the way, he thought about his father. To the world, his father was a man feared by many, a leader whose decisions shaped entire neighborhoods. But to Marcus, he was simply Dad, the man who taught him how to tie his shoes, helped him with homework, and told him never to raise his hand unless it was to defend himself or protect someone else. That night, Marcus sat at his desk, thinking about the new school. He knew it wouldn't be easy. He could already sense the looks, the silent judgments, and the unspoken words. But he promised himself something. He wouldn't let anyone push him into becoming violent. He wouldn't let his father's reputation control his life at school. He wanted to be known for who he was, not for the shadow of the mafia world that followed his family everywhere. The next morning, Marcus dressed carefully. He put on a clean shirt, polished his shoes, and looked at himself in the mirror. His eyes, dark and steady, reflected both strength and sadness. He whispered to himself, "Just stay calm. Just be you." He carried his bag and stepped out of the house, ready for another day. But what Marcus didn't know was that not everyone would let him live quietly. In the halls of that private school, there were boys who thrived on making others feel small. They hadn't yet noticed Marcus fully, but it was only a matter of time. His quiet nature, his skin color, and his different background would soon draw their attention. And once bullies set their eyes on someone, they rarely let go. For now, Marcus held on to hope. He imagined himself making one good friend, maybe joining the basketball team, maybe even laughing with others at lunch one day. He wanted to believe that this school would be different. He wanted to believe that he could finally live without carrying the weight of his father's name. But deep in his heart, Marcus also knew the truth. Life had never been simple for him, and people had never been kind without a reason. His journey at this school was only just beginning, and he could already feel a storm waiting on the horizon. Asterisk. Marcus had survived the first week at his new school by keeping his head low and his mouth shut. He moved from class to class like a shadow, speaking only when teachers asked him a direct question, never raising his hand for attention. He thought this silence was his shield, a way to protect himself from unwanted trouble. But what Marcus didn't realize was that his very silence was what made some students notice him even more. There was a group of boys who always seemed to stand out wherever they went. They walked the hallways as if they owned them, their laughter louder than anyone else's, their sneakers squeaking on the polished floor as though daring others to look their way. Everyone in school knew them. They were the kind who bullied, openly mocking the way a kid spoke, the brand of shoes someone wore, or the way another carried their backpack. They never got in real trouble because their parents were wealthy and had influence. Teachers often looked the other way, and students avoided conflict with them. Marcus first saw them during lunch. He was sitting at his usual corner table, away from the noise when the group passed by. One of the boys, tall with spiked blonde hair, stopped and stared at Marcus for a moment too long. His friends followed his gaze, and Marcus felt the weight of their eyes. He pretended to focus on his food, but it was too late. The encounter had begun. "New kid?" the tall boy said, his voice loud enough to grab attention. "Why you sitting here all alone?" His tone wasn't friendly. It was sharp, mocking, like he already knew the answer but wanted to embarrass Marcus. Marcus raised his head slowly. He didn't answer right away. He knew better than to respond with anger. "I just like quiet places," he said calmly. The group chuckled. Another boy with freckles leaned over. "Quiet places? In a cafeteria? You must be some kind of genius." His words dripped with sarcasm, and the others laughed. Marcus stayed still, his heart thumping, but his face remained expressionless. His father's words echoed in his head. Never show fear. Never show anger first. Control the room with silence. But silence only fueled the bully's interest. The blonde one grinned and said, "What's your name?" "Marcus," he replied. The boy smirked. "Marcus, what?" Marcus hesitated. He had been warned by his father never to reveal their last name. Casually, "Just Marcus," he said. That answer made them laugh harder. "Just Marcus," one of them repeated mockingly. "What are you, some kind of mystery superhero?" The group moved on after a few more laughs, but Marcus knew this wasn't the end. Bullies didn't simply forget. Once they noticed someone, it was only a matter of time before they returned. Later that day in gym class, Marcus found himself again in their shadow. The same group dominated the basketball court, playing rough and laughing as though they were the kings of the school. When Marcus joined the game, he tried to stay out of their way, passing the ball quickly and avoiding direct confrontation. But when he accidentally stole the ball from the blonde boy and scored a basket, the laughter stopped. The boy's face turned red. He shoved Marcus hard in the chest. "Watch yourself," he growled. Marcus steadied himself, refusing to push back. "It's just a game," he said softly. But those words only made the boy angrier. His friends circled around, and for a moment, Marcus thought he might have to fight. But the gym teacher's whistle blew, breaking the tension. Still, the look in their eyes told Marcus everything. This was personal now. That night, Marcus lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He had wanted to keep a low profile, to stay invisible, but instead he had caught the attention of the very people he had hoped to avoid. He remembered the way they laughed at him in the cafeteria, the way the blonde boy shoved him, and the way the others circled like wolves ready to strike. He clenched his fists under the blanket. His father's voice came back to him again. A man doesn't start fights, but he doesn't run either. Sometimes silence is strength. Sometimes action is necessary. Marcus didn't know which one the situation would require. But he had a feeling the bullies weren't finished with him. The next day confirmed his fears. As he walked down the hallway to his locker, he found it scratched with crude words and slurs. His books were scattered on the floor, pages torn, and his basketball shoes were missing. Standing nearby, the same group of boys laughed quietly, pretending they had nothing to do with it. Marcus picked up his books one by one, his face calm, but inside, anger burned. He wanted to shout, to punch, to scare them the way his father would, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. He knew the moment he lost control, he would become exactly what they wanted him to be, a target who reacted as he walked away. One of the bullies called out, "Hey Marcus, don't worry man, we're just teaching you how things work around here. You'll get used to it." Marcus didn't turn around. He just kept walking, his silence louder than any words. But deep in his chest, a storm was building. He wasn't sure how long he could keep calm, and he knew sooner or later, the bullies would push him too far. Marcus had hoped the bullies would get bored and leave him alone. But instead, his silence and self-control only seemed to make them hungrier. They were like predators testing their prey, circling closer every day, waiting for a reaction. The more Marcus ignored them, the more creative they became in trying to break him. It started small, a push in the hallway, a whispered insult when teachers weren't listening, a basketball passed too hard during gym, hitting Marcus in the chest. Every time, Marcus brushed it off, telling himself not to fall into their trap. But little by little, their cruelty grew sharper. One morning, Marcus opened his locker to find it crammed with crumpled papers. He pulled one out, unfolded it, and froze. The paper was covered with racist slurs written in thick black marker. He didn't say a word. He just stood there for a long time, staring at the ugly letters. Other students passed by, some glancing, some pretending not to see. No one offered help. The bullies, standing a few feet away, snickered. "What's wrong, Marcus?" One of them said with a smirk. "Don't you like the decorations we made? For you?" Marcus shoved the papers into his bag and slammed the locker shut. His jaw tightened, but he kept walking. Inside, though, something twisted. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was humiliation. During lunch that day, they tried again. Marcus sat at his usual corner table, but this time the bullies approached him directly. The blonde one, whose name Marcus had learned was Ryan, dropped his tray on Marcus's table with a loud clang. The others surrounded him, forming a circle. "So, Marcus," Ryan said with a fake smile, "tell us, where are you from?" "Oh, you don't look like you belong here." Marcus looked up slowly. His calm brown eyes met Ryan's, unflinching. "I'm from the city," he said. Ryan chuckled. "Yeah, but what part of the city? The ghetto?" His friends laughed cruelly. Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm from where respect matters," he replied softly. The laughter stopped for a moment. Ryan leaned in closer. "Respect? Do you think anyone here respects you?" He grabbed Marcus's apple from his tray and tossed it across the cafeteria. It hit the floor and rolled under another table. The room grew quiet. Some students watched with wide eyes, waiting to see if Marcus would finally explode. But Marcus simply picked up his sandwich and took a slow bite. Refusing to give them the satisfaction, Ryan slammed his hand on the table. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Marcus finally met his eyes again, calm as ever. You want me to fight you? He said, quietly. But I'm not giving you what you want. Ryan's smirk faltered for the first time. His friends pulled him back, whispering that the teachers were watching. But as they walked away, Ryan muttered under his breath, "This isn't over." That night, Marcus sat at his desk, his untouched homework spread out before him. He thought about telling his father, but he knew what would happen if he did. His father would storm into the school, not with guns or violence, but with a presence so heavy it would crush anyone in his path. Marcus didn't want that. He wanted to handle it on his own. He wanted to prove to himself that he wasn't weak, but the bullies didn't slow down. A few days later, Marcus found his gym shoes stuffed in the toilet. The next week, someone spray-painted a racial slur on his locker. Each time, Marcus stayed calm, but inside, he felt something building, a storm that grew heavier with every insult, every shove, every cruel laugh. Then came the cafeteria incident. Marcus had just sat down with his tray when Ryan and his crew struck again. This time, they didn't just mock him, they humiliated him in front of everyone. Ryan walked up behind him, grabbed his milk carton, and poured it over Marcus's head. Cold liquid ran down his face, dripping onto his clothes, his tray, the floor. The cafeteria erupted with laughter. Some students gasped, others pulled out their phones to record. Marcus sat frozen for a moment, milk dripping from his hair, his sandwich soggy and ruined. His hands clenched under the table. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. For the first time, he was on the edge of breaking. Ryan leaned down, whispering so only Marcus could hear. "Go on, tough guy. Do something. Show us who you are." Marcus slowly stood up. The cafeteria went silent. His fists tightened at his sides. His eyes locked onto Ryan's with a fire no one had seen before. For a moment, it looked like he might finally snap. But then, Marcus did something no one expected. He picked up his wet tray, walked to the trash can, and calmly threw it away. Without saying a word, he walked out of the cafeteria, his wet shoes squeaking on the floor. The bullies laughed again, but this time it was uneasy. There was something in the way Marcus had looked at Rihanna's quiet, steady promise that unsettled them. For the first time, they wondered if they had gone too far. That night, Marcus looked in the mirror at his reflection. His father's words came back again. Strength isn't in the fist. It's in control. Marcus breathed deeply, trying to believe it. But deep down, he knew it couldn't go on like this forever. The storm inside him was growing stronger. And storms, once they broke, could destroy everything in their path. Marcus had lasted longer than most people would have. He had taken the insults, the shoves, the slurs, the humiliations, all without raising his voice or his fists. He thought patience and silence would protect him, that staying calm would make the bullies lose interest. But he was wrong. His silence was fuel for them, and every day they pushed harder. Waiting for him to crack, the breaking point came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Classes were ending, and the hallways were buzzing with chatter as students prepared to leave. Marcus, carrying his books, walked toward the gym to change for basketball practice. The corridor smelled faintly of wet shoes and disinfectant, and his footsteps echoed against the lockers. He didn't notice Ryan and his crew following behind until it was too late. Inside the locker room, the air was heavy with the stench of sweat and damp clothes. Marcus set his bag down on the bench and began to change. That's when Ryan and the others walked in, their voices low, their laughter sharp. The room suddenly felt smaller, the silence heavier. "Well, look who it is," Ryan said, tossing his backpack onto the bench with a thud. "Our quiet little mystery man." Marcus didn't respond. He kept his eyes on his shoes, tying the laces carefully. But inside, his chest tightened. He could feel the storm pressing against his ribs, begging to be released. Ryan stepped closer. His friends spreading out like vultures, circling their prey. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" he sneered, walking around all calm, acting like nothing touches you. Marcus finally looked up, his eyes steady. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," he said softly. Ryan smirked. "Oh, really? Then why don't you ever fight back? Huh, you scared? Or maybe you just don't belong here." Another boy chimed in. "Yeah, maybe he should go back to where he came from." Their laughter bounced off the lockers, sharp and cruel. Marcus clenched his fists, forcing himself to breathe slowly. He had sworn to himself he wouldn't lose control. But then Ryan shoved him, hard, against the lockers. The metal rattled loudly, echoing through the room. "Come on, tough guy," Ryan taunted. "Say something. Or are you too scared?" Marcus straightened slowly, his eyes never leaving Ryan's. His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made the laughter fade. "You don't know who you're messing with." The room went quiet. Ryan's smirk faltered for just a second, but then he forced a laugh. "Oh yeah, what are you gonna do? Cry to mommy and daddy?" Marcus's jaw tightened. His voice dropped. Lower, each word sharp and deliberate. "My father is not someone you want to insult." The bullies exchanged confused glances. Ryan stepped closer, almost nose-tunes with Marcus. "Why? Who is he?" Marcus didn't flinch. He leaned in just enough for Ryan to hear. "He's the man people fear, even when they don't say his name. He's the man who taught me patience. But also what happens when patience runs out." For the first time, Ryan's grin disappeared completely. A flicker of doubt passed through his eyes, but pride wouldn't let him back down. "You think that scares me?" he scoffed. "This is school, not the streets. Your daddy doesn't control what happens here." Marcus finally let out a breath he had been holding for weeks. His voice grew sharper, filled with a cold fire. "Then you should pray he never has to come here. Because if he does, you'll learn what real fear looks like." The room was dead silent. Even Ryan's friends shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to react. Marcus's calm tone didn't sound like a bluff, sounded like a warning, heavy and dangerous. But Ryan, too stubborn to back down in front of his friends, shoved Marcus again. This time, harder. "You're full of crap," he spat. "You think you're untouchable just because of some story about your dad? Newsflash, Marcus, you're nothing here." Something snapped inside Marcus then. The storm he had been holding back for weeks broke free. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't shout. Instead, he straightened his shoulders, his presence filling the room in a way none of them expected. His eyes burned, his voice steady and cold. "You think I'm nothing?" he said. "You think I'm weak because I stay quiet. I stay quiet because I know what I'm capable of. I stay quiet because I was taught never to start a fight. I can't. Finish, but don't mistake silence for weakness. Because when I break, I don't just break you, I destroy you." The words hung in the air like a blade. Ryan's smirk was gone. His friends stood frozen, their laughter completely dead. For the first time, they saw Marcus not as the quiet kid in the corner, but as someone carrying a weight far greater than they understood. The door to the locker room creaked open then, and the gym teacher's voice echoed. "Hurry it up, boys. Practice starts in 5. The spell broke. Ryan quickly stepped back, muttering, "This isn't over," though his voice lacked the confidence it had before. The boys gathered their things, avoiding Marcus's eyes as they shuffled out. Marcus stood alone for a moment, breathing heavily. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the storm still raging inside. He had finally spoken the truth. hinted at the power behind his name. And though he hadn't raised a fist, the shift in the air was undeniable. That night, Marcus lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. He replayed the confrontation over and over. Part of him felt relief that he had finally stood his ground, that he had reminded them he wasn't someone to toy with. But another part of him felt uneasy. He had opened a door he couldn't close. He had revealed a piece of himself, a piece of his family's shadow. And deep down, Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The bullies wouldn't forget. They might even try harder to push him, to prove they weren't afraid. But Marcus also knew something had changed. He wasn't just the quiet kid anymore. He was the boy with a secret one that could shake the entire school if it ever fully came to light. The storm had broken, and storms never ended quietly. The locker room confrontation lingered in the air long after it ended. Ryan and his friends walked away that day without another word, but their silence wasn't deceit, was planning. Bullies like them never gave up easily. When pride was bruised, revenge became their favorite weapon. By the next week, whispers started floating around the school. Students leaned close to one another in the hallways, trading rumors like secrets. "Did you hear what Marcus said in the locker room?" some whispered. "He said his dad is someone powerful, someone dangerous." Others dismissed it as bluffing, but the seed had been planted and curiosity spread quickly. Ryan, however, couldn't let it go. His bruised ego demanded proof. If Marcus was lying, Ryan wanted to expose him. If Marcus was telling the truth, then Ryan wanted to know exactly who they were dealing with. Either way, he wanted control back. It didn't take long. Ryan's family had money, and money had ways of finding answers. One afternoon, after practice, Ryan bragged quietly to his friends. "I asked my cousin about Marcus's family. He lives in the city, right? Well, guess what? His dad isn't some ordinary businessman. People call him the boss. You know what? That means Mafia. Real Mafia." The boys' laughter died in their throats. The word Mafia carried a weight none of them had expected. They had seen movies, heard stories, but the idea that one of their classmates was connected to something that dark and dangerous made their stomachs twist. Ryan smirked, proud of the fear he saw flicker in his friend's eyes. He thinks he can scare us with silence. He thinks just because his daddy's a gangster, we're supposed to bow down? Nah, I'm not afraid of him. He's just another kid. But Ryan's words didn't match the unease growing inside him. That night, as he lay in bed, the thought gnawed at him. What if it's true? What if his father really is who people say he is? The truth came crashing in a few days later. It was a Friday afternoon, and the rain had just cleared, leaving the sky gray and heavy. Marcus walked through the courtyard quietly, trying once again to keep his head down. Ryan and his group spotted him near the steps and decided this was their moment. They cornered him, cutting off his path. Well, if it isn't Mafia. Junior, Ryan sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "Why don't you tell us, Marcus? Is it true? Is Daddy a gangster?" A crowd began to gather. Students, curious and hungry for drama, leaned in to listen. Marcus froze, his jaw tightening. He hated this more than anything. The spotlight, the whispers, the probing into a part of his life he never wanted exposed. "Answer me," Ryan demanded, shoving Marcus's shoulder. "Tell everyone who you really are." Now Marcus's chest rose and fell with deep breaths. His silence only made the tension sharper. Finally, he lifted his head, his eyes locking onto Ryan's with a cold intensity. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the courtyard like a blade. "You want the truth? Fine. My father's name is known in places you wouldn't dare step foot in, People don't whisper it because they're afraid of lies. They whisper it because they know it's real. He doesn't have to shout to be respected. He doesn't have to fight to win. And if you were smart, you'd remember that. The crowd gasped. Ryan's smirk faltered, his face paling slightly. His friends shifted uneasily, glancing at each other. Some students in the crowd stepped back, as if the mere mention of Marcus's father carried danger with it. Ryan forced a laugh, trying to cover his fear. So what? You think that makes you special? Do you think that makes you untouchable? This is school, Marcus, not some gangster movie. Marcus stepped closer, his voice steady as stone. You're right. This is school. And that's why I've kept quiet. That's why I've let you push me, humiliate me, treat me like I don't belong. Because I don't want to be like him. I don't want to use fear to make people respect me. But don't mistake that for weakness. Don't push me into becoming something I've tried so hard not to be. The courtyard was silent now. The only sound was the wind whistling between the buildings. For the first time, Ryan had no comeback. The weight of Marcus's words hung heavy, choking the laughter out of everyone. Then, one of the teachers stepped into the courtyard, demanding the crowd disperse. Students scattered quickly, whispering as they left, but the story had already spread like wildfire. By the end of the day, everyone in school knew Marcus was the son of a mafia boss. That evening, Marcus walked home alone, his backpack heavy on his shoulders. He knew what was coming now. The whispers would turn into stares, the stares into fear, and the fear into distance. He would no longer be just Marcus. He would forever be the mafia boss's son. When he got home, his father was waiting. In the study, a glass of whiskey sat untouched on the table beside him. He looked at Marcus with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. You've been keeping your head down, his father said slowly. But I hear things have changed. Marcus nodded, his throat dry. They found out. His father leaned back in his chair, silent for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice calm but heavy. Son, I never wanted this life to follow you. Why I told you to be patient, to stay quiet, but people like them, they always push until they break something. The question is, do you let them break you, or do you show them why you can't be broken? Marcus lowered his eyes. I don't want to be feared like you, Dad. His father stood, placing a hand on his shoulder. Then don't be feared. Be respected. There's a difference. And sometimes respect only comes after people learn who you are. That night, Marcus lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The secret was out. His quiet shield was gone. Tomorrow, when he walked into school, everything would be different. Some would avoid him. Some would whisper. The bullies might still try. But now they knew the truth. And Marcus realized something he had been running from. He couldn't hide forever. The name he carried was heavy, but maybe it could also be his strength. The secret was revealed, and nothing would ever be the same again. By Monday morning, the school felt different. The air itself seemed heavier, as if the walls carried the weight of a secret everyone now knew. Marcus had barely stepped through the gates when he felt it ties on him from every direction. Students huddled in groups, whispering and glancing his way, their voices low, but their curiosity loud enough to fill the courtyard. It wasn't just the bullies anymore. It was everyone. His classmates, kids he had never spoken to, even students from other grades. The story had traveled faster than wildfire. Marcus is the son of a mafia boss. Some whispered the word mafia like it was forbidden, as though even saying it too loudly might bring danger. Others said it with awe, almost like Marcus had suddenly become a legend. A few laughed nervously, pretending not to believe it, though their eyes betrayed the truth they did. Marcus walked with his head high, but inside, his chest tightened with unease. He never wanted this. He had wanted to blend in, to just be another student. But now, he wasn't Marcus anymore. He was the Mafia son, the kid who carried the shadow of a man feared far beyond these school walls. When he entered the classroom, the usual chatter died instantly. Every seat turned toward him, eyes wide and cautious. He sat down quietly, pretending not to notice, though he could feel the tension pressing on his shoulders. The teacher began the lesson, but even she glanced at him once too often, as if she too had heard the whispers at lunch. The cafeteria was worse. When Marcus entered, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Tables that were once full seemed to part, like waves, leaving him a clear path. Students avoided his eyes, their trays clutched tighter than usual. Some looked at him with fear, others with curiosity, and a few with something else respect. Marcus sat at his usual corner table. But this time, he wasn't alone. A boy from the basketball team, someone who had barely spoken to him before, walked over and sat down. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked casually, though his voice trembled slightly. Marcus nodded. The boy gave him a nervous smile. "People are talking," he whispered. "They're saying you're dad. It's like a big deal." Marcus sighed, keeping his eyes on his food. "People say a lot of things." The boy didn't press further, but his presence alone sent a message to the rest of the cafeteria. Slowly, others began inching closer. Students who wanted to be near Marcus not because they cared about him, but because being near him now meant safety or maybe power. Meanwhile, Ryan and his crew watched from the far side of the room. Their laughter was quieter now, their expressions tighter. They didn't approach Marcus, not this time. Instead, they whispered among themselves, their eyes darting nervously in his direction. "Is it really true?" One of Ryan's friends muttered. Ryan clenched his jaw. "It doesn't matter if it's true. He's still just a kid. He can't touch us here." But even as he spoke, he didn't believe his own words. The memory of Marcus's steady, cold eyes in the locker room haunted him. He remembered the way Marcus had spoken, not with threats, but with certainty. And deep down, Ryan knew. Marcus hadn't been bluffing. The days that followed only deepened the divide. Teachers treated Marcus differently now. They were more careful. With their words, less quick to correct him. Students gave him space in the hallways, stepping aside as he passed. Some nodded respectfully, as though acknowledging a prince of some unseen kingdom. Others avoided him altogether, too afraid to even make eye contact. For Marcus, it was suffocating. He had never wanted this spotlight, never wanted the power that came with his father's name. He wanted to be Marcus's the boy who liked basketball, who dreamed of college, who wanted a life far away from the shadows of the Mafia. But now, no one saw him anymore. They only saw the shadow. One evening, as he sat in his room, Marcus thought about what his father had told him. Be respected, not feared. There's a difference. But here at school, he wasn't sure anyone could tell the difference anymore. The bullies, though, were learning fast. Ryan and his crew had grown quieter. They no longer shoved Marcus in the hallways, no longer mocked him openly, but their pride burned. Ryan, especially, hated the shift. He had been the king of the school, the one everyone watched and followed. Now, eyes no longer followed him. They followed Marcus. In desperation, Ryan tried to regain control. He started spreading whispers. Marcus is lying. He's just trying to scare people. His dad isn't anyone special. He's just making up stories. But his efforts failed. Too many students believed Marcus. Too many had already seen the fear in Ryan's eyes during the confrontation. The rumor of Marcus's father had grown bigger than the truth. It had become legend. One afternoon, Marcus found himself standing by the lockers when a younger student approached nervously. "Marcus," the boy said quietly, "those guys who used to pick on me, they stopped. They don't bother me anymore. They said it's because, well, because of you." Marcus looked at him, surprised. "Because of me?" The boy nodded. "They're scared." Marcus didn't know how to respond. He had never intended to protect anyone. But in that moment, he realized something. His name, his presence, had already begun changing the school. Not because he wanted it to, but because people believed it would. That night, Marcus lay awake again, thinking about how quickly everything had changed. Just weeks ago, he was the quiet kid in the corner, the target of cruel jokes and humiliations. Now, he was something else entirely, someone people watched. Respected, even feared. But respect built on fear was fragile. It was dangerous, and Marcus knew it wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, Ryan would make his move. Sooner or later. The school would see whether Marcus's strength was only in his father's shadow, whether it was his own. The rumors had turned into certainty. By the end of the week, no one doubted it anymore. Marcus's father wasn't an ordinary man. He wasn't just a rich businessman. He was something else. And when whispers turned into fear, the atmosphere of the school became tense. Students treated Marcus with a strange mix of respect and caution. Some smiled nervously when they saw him. Others moved out of his way without him asking. The bullies Ryan and his crew stayed quieter than usual, but their pride still burned. Ryan hated seeing Marcus walk the halls with his head high. Hated how people seemed to bow to him without a word. For Ryan, it was a daily reminder that he had lost control of his kingdom. But then came the day that scourged everything. It started like any other Tuesday. The sky was pale, the air cool. Marcus sat quietly in his morning class, scribbling notes while the teacher spoke. But when the bell rang and students poured into the hallway, they found something unusual waiting outside the school gates. A black car, sleek, polished, the kind of car that didn't belong in front of a school. The driver stood by it in a dark suit, sunglasses covering his eyes. His posture was stiff, professional. Students whispered, pressing against the windows to look. Then the car door opened, and out stepped Marcus's father. He didn't need to speak. His presence alone was enough to command the entire street. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an expensive gray suit that seemed tailored to perfection, he walked with a calm confidence that turned heads instantly. His eyes, sharp and dark, scanned the school building like he had been here 100 times before. He didn't smile, didn't frown. He simply walked, and the world seemed to make way for him. Whispers rushed through the students like a storm. "That's him. That's Marcus's dad. He really came." Inside, Marcus felt his stomach twist. He had begged for this not to happen. He had wanted to keep his father out of the school world, out of the fragile balance he was trying to hold. But here he was. The shadow had arrived. The principal rushed out to greet him, her usual strict tone replaced by nervous politeness. "Mr. Romano," she said, her hands ringing slightly. What an unexpected visit. Marcus's father nodded politely. His voice was calm, smooth, but carried a weight that filled the air. "I heard my son has been having some difficulties here. I thought it would be best if I spoke with you directly." The principal swallowed hard. Of course. Please, come inside." The sight of Marcus's father walking through the hallways was something no one would forget. The chatter died instantly. Students pressed themselves against the lockers to give him space, their eyes wide with both fear and fascination. Teachers, too, lowered their voices and straightened their posture, as if an inspector had entered their classroom. Marcus, sitting at his desk, felt the room vibrate with whispers. His heart pounded as he heard the heavy footsteps approaching. When the classroom door opened, every head turned, and there he was, his father. For a moment, father and son locked eyes. Marcus saw not the feared Mafia boss, but the man who had taught him discipline, patience, and strength. His father gave him the slightest nod, a silent message. "I am here for you." The teacher stammered nervously. "See, can I help you, sir?" "I'm just here to see my son," Marcus's father replied calmly, his deep voice making the room fall silent again. "I won't take much of your time." He stepped toward Marcus's desk. The entire class held its breath. His father placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, firm yet gentle. "How are you, son?" Marcus swallowed. "I'm fine." His father studied him for a moment, then turned to the class. His gaze swept over them, calm but piercing, and every student who had ever whispered or laughed at Marcus lowered their eyes. "Good," he said softly, "because my son deserves respect. He deserves the same respect each of you expects for yourselves. No threats, no raised voice, just calm." Steady words that carried more weight than 100 shouted warnings. Then, as if on cue, Ryan walked past the doorway with his friends. He froze when he saw Marcus's father standing there. Their eyes met, and Ryan's face drained of color. Marcus's father didn't raise a hand, didn't take a step toward him. He simply held Ryan's gaze for a long moment. It was enough. Ryan looked away first, his confidence crumbling not. Later that day, Marcus's father met privately with the principal. No one knew exactly what was said, but whispers spread quickly. Some said he donated a large sum of money to the school. Others claimed he made quiet promises or threats that ensured Marcus's safety. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. The school would never treat Marcus the same way again. When the black car finally drove away, silence lingered in the air. Students walked carefully, speaking in hushed tones. Teachers watched Marcus differently, now not as a student, but as someone they didn't want to cross. For Marcus, though, the visit was bittersweet. On one hand, he felt safe for the first time in weeks. The bullies wouldn't dare touch him now. But on the other, he felt the weight of his father's shadow heavier than ever. He hadn't wanted this power, hadn't wanted this fear. All he had wanted was to be Marcus, not the Mafia boss's son. That evening, at dinner, Marcus sat across from his father. The table was quiet, the air heavy. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Why did you come?" His father leaned back, his expression calm. "Because I wanted them to know who you are." Marcus frowned. "But that's the problem. I don't want them to know me like that. I don't want their respect because they're scared of you." His father studied him for a moment, then sighed. "Respect is complicated, son. Sometimes it comes from love, sometimes from fear. What matters is that no one hurts you again." Marcus lowered his eyes. He knew his father was right in his own way. But deep down, Marcus wanted something different. He wanted to be respected for his own strength, not his father's shadow. That night, as he lay in bed, Marcus thought about the day. The image of his father in the school halls, the fear in Ryan's eyes, the whispers of the other students. Everything had changed. The bullies would never touch him again, not directly. But Marcus couldn't shake the question that burned inside him. If people only respect me because of my father, then who am I really? The visit had ended the bullying, but it had also begun something else. Something Marcus wasn't sure he was ready for. Asterisk. The days after Marcus's father's visit were strangely quiet. The school, once buzzing with gossip and laughter, now carried an invisible weight. Teachers spoke softer, students moved more carefully, and whispers about Marcus had turned into silence. No one dared to laugh at him anymore. No one shoved him. In the hallway, no one vandalized his locker. No one poured milk on his head in the cafeteria. The bullies who had once ruled the school seemed to vanish into the background. Ryan, the loudest of them all, now avoided Marcus completely. Whenever their eyes met across the hallway, Ryan would quickly look away, his face pale, his jaw tight. He no longer had his pack of friends trailing behind him. They, too, had scattered, unwilling to stand near the boy who had gone too far and picked the wrong target. Marcus should have felt victorious. The bullying had stopped. The whispers had turned into respect, or at least fear. For the first time, no one dared to touch him. And yet, he didn't feel like he had one. Because the truth was, Marcus hadn't done anything to earn it. It wasn't his fists or his voice that had silenced the bullies. It was his father's shadow. And that shadow now followed him everywhere. At lunch, he noticed how tables shifted when he walked in. Students who once ignored him now waved nervously or offered him a seat, but their smiles didn't feel genuine. It wasn't friendship, it was survival. They wanted to be close to Marcus, not because they liked him, but because they feared what being against him might mean. One afternoon, as Marcus sat in the library, the same boy from the basketball team, who had once joined him at lunch, approached again. "Hey," the boy said softly, "I was wondering if you wanted to come shoot hoops after school." Marcus looked up. The boy's smile seemed kind, but Marcus could see the hesitation in his eyes. Was it a real invitation? Or was it because of who Marcus's father was? "I'm busy," Marcus replied, though it wasn't true. The boy nodded quickly and walked away, relief flashing across his face as though he was glad Marcus hadn't said yes. Marcus closed his book and stared at the page without seeing the words. A question kept circling in his mind. Who am I, really? At home, his father seemed proud. "No one bothers you now," he said one evening at dinner, sipping his glass of wine. "The message has been sent." Marcus nodded silently, but he couldn't shake the heaviness in his chest. He didn't want to live under a message. He didn't want people to see him as untouchable, just because of fear. The breaking point came a week later. Marcus was walking through the courtyard when he saw something that stopped him cold. A smaller boy, a freshman with glasses too big for his face, was being cornered by a group of older students. Not Ryan's crew, but others who had taken the empty throne of bullying now that Ryan had stepped back. They pushed the boy against the wall, mocking his stutter, laughing at his tears. Marcus froze. He knew that feeling, the helplessness, the shame, the way the laughter cut deeper than fists. For a moment, he saw himself standing there weeks ago. When no one had come to help him, the bullies noticed Marcus watching. They froze too, their laughter dying instantly. One of them stepped back, his voice shaky. We weren't doing anything, Marcus." Marcus's jaw tightened. Slowly, he walked toward them. The smaller boy's eyes widened in fear, but also in hope. The bullies stepped aside, clearing a path for Marcus. He placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "Go on," Marcus said softly. "You're safe." The boy nodded quickly, clutching his books to his chest, and ran off. Marcus turned back to the bullies. They were pale, their bravado gone. He could see the fear in their eyes, the same fear everyone now carried when they looked at him. For a moment, he thought about using it. He thought about letting them tremble, letting them learn the same lesson Ryan had. But then he remembered his father's words. Be respected, not feared. He took a deep breath and spoke. Listen, you think pushing around kids smaller than you makes you strong? It doesn't. It makes you weak. Real strength is knowing you could hurt someone, but choosing not to. The bullies stood silent, ashamed and afraid. Marcus didn't need to threaten them. His calm words were heavier than any punch. Don't let me see this again, Marcus finished. Then he turned and walked away. The next day, whispers spread again, not of fear this time, but of something else. Students talked about how Marcus had stepped in, how he had defended the freshman without raising a fist, without hiding behind his father's name. For the first time, respect began to grow, not from fear of who his father was, but from who Marcus himself was becoming. Over the following weeks, Marcus noticed the change. Students started greeting him differently. Some smiled without hesitation now. Others sat near him in class, asking for help with homework or inviting him to join group projects. The younger boy he had defended followed him around sometimes, not out of fear, but out of admiration. And Marcus realized something. Respect earned through fear faded quickly. But respect earned through dignity, through choosing restraint, when others expected violence, lasted longer. One evening, Marcus sat with his father in the study. The lamp cast a warm glow across the room. His father asked, "How's school now?" Marcus hesitated, then said quietly, "Better. But not because of your visit, because I finally learned. I don't need to be you to be respected. 'Tis." Father looked at him for a long moment. Then, to Marcus's surprise, he smiled faintly. "Good," he said. "That means you're stronger than I ever was." For the first time, Marcus felt lighter. He knew life wouldn't suddenly become easy. There would always be whispers, always be shadows. But he had learned something the bullies never understood. Silence wasn't weakness, and strength wasn't fists. Real strength was knowing who you are, even when the world tries to define you. And Marcus was finally ready to be who he was, not just the Mafia boss's son, but Marcus.